The Vatican offers a clarification to their directives on blessings of couples in irregular unions after many bishops' conferences vow to resist. Editor of Catholic World News, Philip Lawler, weighs in. And comedian Rob Schneider talks about his new movie, Daddy-Daughter Trip, and his newfound Catholic faith. And on the anniversary of the passing of Pope Benedict XVI, an encore of my interview with his former personal secretary, Archbishop Georg Ganswein. The World Over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
Happy New Year and a warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a post, an X post. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Let's get started. On December 18th, Pope Francis and the Vatican's doctrinal office issued a letter, Fiducia Supplicans. It allows priests to give blessings to same-sex couples and couples in irregular situations under certain circumstances. Now, bishops and bishops' conferences all over the world, including Africa, Peru, Brazil, Poland, Hungary, and Kazakhstan, have all issued statements of resistance or opposition to this document. And just this week, on January 4th, the Vatican's doctrinal office issued a further clarification of the document. Here, with analysis, is the editor of Catholic World News and visiting fellow at New Hampshire's Thomas More College, Philip Lawler. Philip, thank you for being here. Before we get to the backlash to those blessings, I want to get your reaction to what the Dicastery of the Doctrine of Faith here, what their clarification actually says. It attempts to assuage the concerns of these bishops who have objected to the document. In a press release, Cardinal Fernandez writes, quote, "Some bishops, for example, have established that each priest must carry out the work of discernment and that he may, however, perform those blessings, or these blessings, only in private. None of this is problematic if it is expressed with due respect for a text signed and approved by the Supreme Pontiff himself, while attempting in some way to accommodate the reflection contained in it. Each local bishop, by virtue of his ministry, always has the power of discernment, prudence, and attention to the ecclesial context and to the local culture, could allow for different methods of application, but not a total or definitive denial of this path that is proposed to priests." Okay, that's what the document says. Now, Phil, after purposely cutting bishops out of any competency here, Fernandez is now trying to reintroduce the role of bishops, but not really. I mean, he says the power of discernment is something they have, but, quote, not a total or definitive denial of these blessings is within their power. What do you make of this?
Well, it's a fascinating statement. You know, in the original statement released on December 18th, this same dicastery said there would be no more guidance on the particulars of the sort of blessings that were contemplated by the document. And now, less than 3 weeks later, we have a 5-page press release giving clarifications of exactly what they said they wouldn't clarify. What this document tells you is that there should be no confusion. Well, there is confusion. There should be no concern that this is somehow in conflict with permanent Catholic teaching. Well, there is that concern. The dicastery is insisting that there should be no confusion, but people are confused. They're clarifying, but it's still not clear. This is a classic case of piling on to the problem that they've already created.
Yeah. Well, Phil, I loved weeks ago when we first reported this, when I had to break open my Christmas show and spend time talking about this. We got some folks saying, you haven't read the document. You haven't read the document closely enough. That's not what it says. There's no doctrinal change here. It's not even implied. Well, I guess the bishops of Africa, Poland, Kazakhstan, they haven't read the document either. I mean, the disconnect between reality and what this document opens the door to is just vexing to anybody with any sense of what's happened over the last few decades. But look, later in this doctrinal clarification, we find this. It says, quote, "In order to avoid any doubt, the declaration adds that when a blessing is requested by a couple in an irregular situation, even though it is expressed outside the rites prescribed by the liturgical books, this blessing should never be imparted in concurrence with the ceremonies of a civil union, and not even in connection with them, nor can it be performed with any clothing, gestures, or words that are proper to a wedding. The same applies to when the blessing is requested by a same-sex couple. It remains clear, therefore, that the blessing must not take place in a prominent place within a sacred building or in front of an altar, as this also would create confusion." Now, Phil, if you've seen the cascade of photos coming forward over the last few weeks, I mean, it's clear, you know, this idea that you can avoid any doubt by only giving the blessing in certain settings or in certain dress is just being ignored.
It is being ignored, and that is so predictable. The Vatican statement today insists, as did the original statement, that there is no change in church teaching. It repeats that. But there is a change in the message that's being conveyed. A blessing is a sign as well as a blessing. Think of some child who sees a couple being blessed by a priest. He knows nothing about what's gone on before that blessing. Doesn't he assume that that blessing conveys some sort of approval? Now, the Dicastery is saying that what's a development in doctrine here is the idea that you can ask for a priest's blessing even if you're not in a perfect situation. Well, we all knew that. Anybody can ask for a priest's blessing at any time. But when you go to a priest with someone else and ask that priest to bless you as a couple or as a group, that has to be implying some approval of the couple or the group. And if that group or that couple is based on immoral behavior, what is the sign? What is the message? It's unmistakable. You can't blame it on the media. The media got this story right, frankly. This was an opening to approval, in a sense, not a wedding, but approval of same-sex unions. And that's why so many of the bishops from around the world, and particularly in the places where the church is growing fastest, they see this as a problem for evangelization, as a counter witness.
Yeah. Well, even Fernandez's own predecessor in Argentina has come out against this document. I mean, the fascinating thing here is all the people trying to explain this away and say, well, it's just a blessing as anyone would pursue a blessing. Well, fine. Phil, nobody has a problem with priests blessing any sinner. We're all sinners. So at the end of Mass, there's your general blessing. Go there. But the fact that you have to issue a document cordoning off a particular type of people and explicitly a couple, it means something. There's a meaning behind it and an intentionality here. Now, an increasing number of bishops and bishops' conferences have issued statements forbidding or objecting to these blessings in their dioceses. Multiple bishops' conferences in Africa, Cameroon, Kenya, Malawi, Angola, Burkina Faso, Niger, Kenya, Rwanda, Zambia, they have all announced that they will not honor Fiducia Supplicans, this document. Ditto for Poland and Kazakhstan and Hungary. For example, President of the Bishops' Conference of Cameroon, Bishop Andrew Nikia, wrote this: "We formally forbid all blessing of homosexual couples in the Church of Cameroon. Rejecting it is in no way being discriminative. It is a legitimate protection of the constant values of humanity in the face of a vice that has become the subject of a claim to legal recognition, and today the subject of a blessing." And I mean, you see this internationally. This from the Bishops' Conference of Poland. Since practicing sexual acts outside of marriage, that is, outside the indissoluble union of a man and woman open to the transmission of life, is always an offense against the will and wisdom of God, expressed in the sixth commandment, people who are in such a relationship cannot receive a blessing. This applies in particular to people in same-sex relationships. Phil, I mean, this growing resistance started immediately after the release of this Vatican declaration, and it quickly spurred this supposed clarification. Now Fernandez says none of this is doctrinal opposition. What is it then? What are we seeing from these bishops?
They think it's the doctrinal opposition. Cardinal Fernandez says it can't be, in the same sense that he says they can't be confused. Well, they are confused, and insofar as they aren't confused, they see this as in conflict with Catholic doctrine. And just by the way, let's bear in mind that just 2 years ago, this same office, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, issued a statement on the question of can the church offer blessings to same-sex unions. And that statement was pretty clear. It said no.
Mm-hmm. But Phil, you see Fernandez in this document going into pretzels, trying to say, well, this is in continuity with that statement. Because, yes, we can't bless the sin, but we're blessing the individual's yearning for a better way forward. That's basically what he says here. And then he tries to distinguish between liturgical blessing and what he calls personal or pastoral blessings. Is there really a difference here?
Oh, I think there is a difference between a liturgical blessing, such as is what you would see at a marriage, a Christian marriage, and a spontaneous blessing where you ask a priest on the sidewalk if he can bless you. That's a legitimate difference. But to make a big deal of it, to say that's a doctrinal development and to encourage it. You see, I mean, you are encouraging people to seek a blessing on a union that the church cannot view with approval. So it may be not liturgical, it's not a ritual, it's not part of a sacramental event, but it is, I don't see how you can say it's not an expression of approval. And you have the bishops of the Eastern Catholic churches pointing out that in the Byzantine tradition, it's very clear that whenever a priest gives a blessing, that is an indication of approval. So you are approving of these couples on the basis of their relationship. I just don't see a way around that. And as you say, Cardinal Fernandez is twisting himself into pretzels, but it's really not that difficult.
Do you see this resistance growing? Will more bishops join this chorus? And are we witnessing a slow-rolling schism here? I mean, Fernandez's pleadings that this changes nothing and only affirms traditional Catholic teaching on marriage and family, does that quell this uprising?
It can't. It just can't. Because, look, if you tell me, oh, Phil, you shouldn't be upset, and I'm still upset, and you keep telling me not to be upset, you're not listening. For all the church, for all the discussion that we've heard about synodality, this is an indication of bishops around the world telling the Vatican, telling the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, this is sending the wrong message, and the Vatican is not listening. And that's a really important development. That's this reaction to this Vatican document is something that I have not seen in all the years that I've covered Catholic affairs, going on 40 years now. This is unprecedented to have a significant proportion of the bishops from around the world and Episcopal conferences saying, no, this statement from the Vatican can't stand. There's a real pressure to roll it back, and I hope the Vatican will start listening soon.
Yeah, no, it's very curious, particularly in this age of a synodal church, which was all about listening, and the bishops were totally cut out of this. This wasn't brought up at the synod. This wasn't part of the, debate or discussion at the synod. It was an ad hoc, separate bit of action by the Pope near the end of the year, in the middle of the Advent season. And the other thing here that we shouldn't glissade over, Phil, not only is there this titanic reaction, the likes of which I've never seen either, and when you talk to some of these bishops, they felt they had to come forward because it is the heart of the faith. And in Africa, they're being challenged by Islamics and other faith traditions about their fidelity to marriage. So this is critical for evangelizing and holding on to the church and the faith in those countries. In a somewhat related story, there was a USA Today report that African priests are coming to the U.S. to help relieve the priest shortage here. Given the traditional nature of the church in Africa, how might their ministry affect what we're seeing in the U.S. church and its reaction to this document?
That's a really good question, and I'll have to wait and see. I don't know enough about the priests who are coming from Africa. It is a fascinating development, isn't it, to have the countries that were once mission territory now sending missionaries to the countries that were once sending missionaries to them. And it's a beautiful thing about the faith to see how that will work. I am hopeful that they will bring the vivacity of the African church to the West, where we're really suffering from a lack of energy. And it could very well be that their traditional views on issues such as marriage and sexuality will have a beneficial effect on our countries and the church in our countries.
Phil, I want to play something for you. This is from my discussion with Robert Royal a few weeks back concerning the German synodal way and this same-sex blessings permitted by this document. Then we'll get your reaction. Watch. Does this bar the German bishops and others who've already created these formalized blessings of same-sex couples, Bob, or does it encourage them to go further? Some of them are already saying this is a small, big step.
Yeah, some people have made the argument that this document is actually intended to prevent the Germans and the Belgians who have been developing formal rituals of same-sex blessings from doing so. But for me, the tip-off in this is that those more progressive elements in the church have no objections to the fact that there are limitations for now about what they're supposed to be doing.
Phil, your thoughts, isn't the German synodal way rather, really a forerunner to so much of what we see coming out of the Vatican now, despite the recent vocal corrections from Pope Francis?
Yes, and I completely agree with Robert Royal there that this is, it's telling that the German bishops who are pushing this synodal path and pushing for blessings of same-sex unions are not troubled by the restrictions that are here on paper. We've seen how this works before in the church. We've seen how the Vatican will say something is not licit, and the so-called progressive Catholics will do it anyway, until finally it's adopted everywhere. Communion in the hand, altar girls. We've seen how this works. The German bishops and other progressives, Father James Martin and others, will push the envelope on this. It's predictable. And by the way, you cannot convince me that part of the reasoning for putting out this document, the original directive, was to put on the brakes on the German bishops by saying that they could not authorize these blessings for same-sex unions because, again, just 2 years ago, the same dicastery gave a very clear answer to that question, and the answer was no. So that's the status quo ante. You can't convince me that they had to say no now in a document so rife with confusing messages and doublespeak.
Yeah, no, they're trying to have it both ways with this document, but it clearly opens a door. I mean, everybody got that right, as you said earlier. Before we run out of time, a priest in the Italian diocese of Livorno was excommunicated at the top of the year by his local bishop for calling Pope Francis, quote, a usurper in his New Year's Eve homily marking the anniversary of Benedict XVI's death. Philip, what do you make of the lightning speed action taken here, particularly given the slow pace of other Vatican disciplinary actions, especially about notorious figures like Rupnik and others?
Well, I think that there is a bishop who is in Livorno who is very anxious to stay on the good side of the Pope. He made the point that this this priest who called the Pope a usurper, had brought upon himself the sentence of excommunication latae sententiae, that is, automatically by an act of schism. Well, yes, but to make it official, the bishop has to announce that the man is excommunicated. And as you say, he did announce that with lightning speed within about 72 hours. That's just not the way these things usually work. I have to assume that this is a bishop who recognizes that Pope Francis, at this stage in the pontificate, is quite ready to reward his friends and punish his perceived enemies.
I want to get your take finally on a meeting with Raymond Cardinal Burke and the Pope. This happened on December 29th, presumably about the Pope's decision to remove Burke's salary and his pension and his living privileges in a Vatican apartment. Now, there have been no details about this meeting from either party. Your thoughts on what this, I guess, photo op was designed to create?
My guess is that Cardinal Burke wanted to meet with the Pope, to speak with him, which he's been wanting to do for several years now without success.
7.
But Cardinal Burke wanted to make this happen before he left Rome, which I think he would not be at all unhappy to do. My understanding is he would be happy to live in retirement in Wisconsin. But of course, we don't know anything about the conversation that took place. It's curious that the Pope allowed it only now after the punishment had been put in place. And again, there's this tremendous double standard between the punishments meted out to Cardinal Burke because he's perceived as a rival or critic of the Pope, and the punishments that are not given to a Rupnik, who is convicted of multiple counts of abuse. So again, the Pope rewards his friends and punishes those he perceives as his enemies.
Phil Lawler, we will leave it there. Catholic World News editor Phil Lawler's reporting and commentary can be found at catholicculture.org. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
He's a stand-up comic, a star of countless comedies, and a former writer and cast member on Saturday Night Live. His latest film, Daddy-Daughter Trip, which he also directed, is out now on Amazon Prime. He's here to talk about his new film and his Catholic faith. Here's my exclusive interview with Rob Schneider. Rob, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Tell me a little about this new family film. I mean, this is literally a family film, Daddy-Daughter Trip. You direct it and star with your real-life daughter, Miranda, and with cameos by your 2 girls. What were the origins of this project?
Well, I wanted to make a movie that had that Italian feel to it, where it was just a family, I love those movies, Cinema Paradiso and Il Postino. A movie that can make you laugh and cry, where you, as a family that has nothing, is just trying to get the best experience for their daughter, and going on a road trip with no money just sounded like a good idea, for a movie.
I want to give folks a little taste of the movie. Here's the trailer, and then I want to talk about this when we come back.
Champagne, madam?
Let me open it.
Go for it. Go! Spring break!
Willie!
Little help? I'm not touching you. I got this. I love it. Hey, baby!
As you mentioned, Rob, family is important to you, not only in your film, but really in the many roles you've taken over the years. And it seems like Adam Sandler and Chris Rock and Dave Spade, your relationship with those gentlemen is also like an extended family. Why do you love working with those guys so much? I know you've been on the road with Adam.
Well, I mean, it's fun. it's more fun now than ever. I mean, we're all, they're all in their 50s. I just turned 60. I mean, at this point in your career, it's if you haven't accomplished what you needed to accomplish now, there's no reason for any zero competition or anything. We've all had success, and it's nice to kind of look back and have decades of work together, and that's really special, and that really comes from Adam Sandler, because he's the workhorse behind so many of the things we've done, and there's a testament to how much he loves his family and his extended family. And also you there's a trust, and whenever you're making a project that has a lot of people in it, you really need to have the trust that for somebody who you don't have to explain everything to, they'll just know and commit to it and have fun with it and have fun with you, because at the end of the day, that's it. You want to be able to be on a set. If you're trying to make a comedy, especially, you really want to get people to laugh, and I think the audience can intrinsically tell if people are having fun or not.
Yeah, and Adam's wife plays your wife in the movie, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's terrific, and she loves working, and she's a really good actress, and I really wanted to have that family feel, and somebody that I felt really comfortable with, and Jackie's family is terrific in the film, and it's got a good. A really good moral to the film, which is just, hanging on to your dreams, and even if they seem if it's impossible, and if you're doing it for your kids, that it is possible.
No, Rob, watching it, it's sweet, it's hilarious. What do you hope viewers take from Daddy-Daughter Trip? And what do you find the audience hungering for, given the current cultural climate and the offerings?
That there's zero politics in this movie. It's just about a family. This movie could have been made in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, or the early 2000s, because it's just about a family that has nothing, that is trying to figure out a way to kind of, in a way, keep up with the Joneses. But the truth of the matter is, if there's a family that has love in it, then it really isn't about what you can give them, or it's what you try to give them, and give them the best that you can. And that's what that was a nice. At the center of this movie is about that. It's tough out there, because, especially these days, because you can, when I was a kid, I mean, there was no internet, so we didn't have access to see like what people had so much more than what we had. So now, the pressures on kids when they. When we used to go home, the pressure would be over, the social school pressure. Now it just continues on your phone. So I think it's really rough.
Great point.
For kids to have to deal with that kind of pressure. And so this is about a little girl that's embarrassed because her parents, again, don't have any money to take them on a trip, for like a little spring break trip or something. So she lies and says she's going to go to all these amazing places. The dad finds out, and he said, well, I'll take her anyway. And he just has just coins in his pocket. And it's nice. People really respond well to the film, and they can relate to that, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to do something for their kids. And then there's the reality of what you really can do.
Well, and what I took from the movie when I watched it, it really is about, no matter where you take them, no matter what you give them, giving them yourself is really the greatest gift you can offer your kids.
That's beautiful. I really like that interpretation, because I really feel like the best scene in the movie to me isn't any of the wonderful trips or the places that they go. It's when they're in a car looking at the stars, saying, I love you all the way to that star and back 1,000 times. That's the thing, because my daughter and I practiced that for 9 months before we did the scene.
Wow.
Just different variations of it. And I said, just see what happens that night. And don't worry about it. Just forget about the cameras now. So she was 8, and it was really important to not make her feel like it was work. So we never called action. We never called action. We just did this.
Slid into it. Wow.
Yeah, that way you really feel like, that's what's beautiful about the kids. And it's beautiful to see kids in movies, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so nice to see.
Their innocence is there, and it's natural. Yeah.
And we have the scenes between the two kids are really beautiful. And there's a really nice scene in there because after my dad passed away, I remember my mother said, she used to have this little my dad used to have this little pillow that he would sleep with, and my mom had it. And I remember going, you're keeping that? And she just kind of, embarrassingly said to me, it doesn't smell like him anymore. And I was like, I broke my heart. And so I put that in the movie for the little boy who lost his mother. And
yeah, remember that moment.
And it's
that's a beautiful line.
So
now we know. Now we know where you got it. I love that. No, it's such a sweet moment in the movie. Christmas is right around the corner, Rob. Before we run out of time, I want to talk a second about your faith. I mean, you talked about your mother. Your mother was Catholic. Your father was Jewish. And you recently made headlines by announcing that you had converted or reverted to Catholicism. You once said that you strayed from the church, but Jesus Christ never strayed from you. What was the occasion of your return to faith? Was it a moment or a time?
I think it was several things. One of it was seeing the obvious darkness that's coming on the world now. I think it comes every 100 years or so, and it's approaching now. And I think you saw some of the organized evil. I don't know how else to say it during COVID and the coercions and the shutdowns and things that were just obviously bad and bad people doing it. But the thing that really awakened me to it was to not be fearful and to we were working on this beautiful script about the Shroud of Turin and the Egyptian linen burial cloth of Jesus Christ. And it was the last draft that I'd written on. It's about this true story about this woman from Cincinnati and this man who was a Benedictine priest, Joe Marino, and they fell in love, and she did prove that this cloth, when they did the carbon dating testing, that the French nuns who repaired this, can you imagine the nuns knowing that this is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, their Lord, how delicate and how they would make this thing that the French call an invisible weave. And so when they tested into the carbon dating, they didn't put into their calculation this newer 16th century threads, which threw the carbon dating off. And then when you think about it's an inverse, and they've tried to dismiss this as a medieval relic, when in fact it's they would have had to be someone in the mid 500 years ago thinking about photography, and that would be invented, and this would be a reverse. This would be a negative. Somebody would have to make a positive of it. It's only on the top 16th fiber of this, and everything that is talked about in the Bible, the blood that is on that cloth. It's everything that was described for what Christ suffered on the cross. And it gave me an awakening to this thing, which really what that cloth is a receipt of the sacrifice that Jesus Christ gave for the greatest gift to mankind, which is that ultimate of forgiveness. And so it really did awaken me, and I couldn't, when you just can't ignore it anymore. You can't try to go through your life and say, well, that's not real. This doesn't exist. And this is, the atheists believe that this is, somehow they cling to this idea that everything in the universe is just an accident, and our intelligence and our empathy and our compassion is just this weird freak accident. Well, we're not. And it comes from God. And I really believe that once you have children, they need to have a foundation and a faith and something that is bigger than them, that connects them to everything. And if you look at the societies that don't have that, whether it was the former Soviet Union, you see a hopelessness. And I really think at this time, as we enter this new age, whatever's going to happen, don't go through it fearfully, but go through it with faith and go through it that it's preordained. And as Father
Rob, a friend of mine commented when they saw that you had converted to the faith. They mentioned something that I've seen in all of your work. You have always had that joyful sparkle that only really comes from, I think, a grounding in faith. You see that those glints of it in all of your work. And it is look, that's the mark of, it's a mark of the faith, joy. And you can't manufacture that. And let's face it, you and I know a lot of comedians who are not the most joyful people on the planet. You don't have that problem. Is that a component? Do you find it now bleeding into your work in ways you never imagined? I'll leave it there before we go.
I don't know where this will lead me. I don't know what work I'll be able to do or what work I feel comfortable doing from here on out. But I think, again, it's just an openness. I mean, the difference between faith and belief coming from the Anglo word, it's willfulness. It's people who have the strict fundamentalist form of thinking, whereas faith is an openness to the truth, whatever that is. So I think as I proceed to whatever's going to happen for me now is I just want to have an openness to, whatever God has planned for me and, to take care of me and my family. And I feel pretty comfortable with this, and I feel at peace, and that's the most important thing. And I think that's what faith can bring you, is peace.
You bet. Well, Rob, Merry Christmas to you and your family. Thank you for bringing us peace, laughs, and joy. And Daddy-Daughter Trip, directed by Rob Schneider, starring he and his family, is available to rent now on Amazon Prime and Apple TV. Merry Christmas, Rob.
Merry Christmas. Thank you, Raymond.
Daddy-Daughter Trip, directed by and starring Rob Schneider, is available to rent now on Amazon Prime and Apple TV. Pope Benedict XVI passed away a year ago on December 31st of 2022. My next guest served as personal secretary to Cardinal Josef Ratzinger and then to Benedict XVI until his death in 2022. He's the author of Who Believes Is Not Alone? My Life Beside Benedict XVI. I sat down with him last November in New York City to discuss the book and his life with the late pontiff. Here's my encore of the exclusive interview with Archbishop Georg Ganswein. Archbishop, thank you for coming. Thank you for sitting down the interview. It's great to see you again. Tell me, in your new book, Who Believes Is Not Alone, you give such penetrating insight into really not only the last years of Pope Benedict, but really your entire life with him, which covers, more than 20 years. I want to go to something more contemporary, the Synod on Synodality, which we just saw the first phase of. Pope Benedict was around when this was announced. Did he have any insights or concerns about this particular form of the Synod of Bishops? Do you recall?
There is a very simple answer. He didn't command that. He read it, but he didn't command it. And I have not asked him. I cannot say why, but I said to myself, if he is silent about that, he will not be asked. And therefore, no question, no answer. Finito.
And that's how he really, is that how he absorbed, if you will, Pope Francis's papacy? He just sort of observed it without getting directly involved or commenting.
That's right, that's right. After his resignation, he said, I'm not more Pope, I'm the Papa Emerito. The Pope is Francis. He is the successor of Peter, actual successor, and he had the responsibility to guide the church and not me more. And all the time, all the 10 years, this was his navigation. That was his clear game, and okay.
I want to talk later about his prayer life, about the personal side of him we didn't see. But I want to take you back. You opened the book in February of 2003. Now, you were working then with Cardinal Josef Ratzinger at the Doctrine of Faith. That's where I first met you. What happens during that coffee break in February of 2003, and why?
I came to the Doctrine of the Faith in '95. And Cardinal Ratzinger was convinced when he will ask Pope John Paul II, I am here more than 20 years. I'm an old man. I'm tired, I will resign. He has written, and there was no answer, not yet, because he came 82.
Yes.
And normally a prefect is nominated for 5 years, another 5 years, another 5 years, another 5 years, 20 years. And he said he was convinced John Paul II this time he will accept. Okay, that
Because he had tried to resign multiple times. He told me that in 2003.
yes, that's right, that's right.
And so
There are the letters from him to the Pope and from the Pope to him, the answers. And then he said in 2002, the first time, I will write another time. And then he must say, okay, I accept. And he was convinced that he will be at most 3-4 months a prefect. But his former secretary became undersecretary of another congregation.
Joseph Clemens.
Yes. And I need a private secretary, and we two, he said, me, the cardinal, and me, he spoken in Italian, Don Giorgio, we will be, I do not know the precise word in English, in Italian it's provisorio.
Provisional.
He is a provisional, and me.
Because he thought he was going to retire.
Yes, and then I retire, and he will go back to the old rule. 3 months. There are 20 years, because there was no answer from Pope John Paul II, month by month. And in April 2005, Pope John Paul died. The conclave, and from the Cardinal Ratzinger, went out Benedict XVI.
And you got drafted into
Yes,
becoming
that was
the Pope's secretary.
Yeah, that
private
was
secretary.
the difference was not more living in the Holy Office and working, but in the Apostolic Palace. That's all. And that was in February 2003. He was convinced the answer will come. But the answer.
Well, you write in the book that this retirement, and I've seen this not only in my interview, throughout his life, retirement, this quest for retirement. He wanted to retire to Bavaria with his brother. They were going to live in a little chalet and write and play music together. He sort of had this vision in his head. But you say in the book, it was a constant theme that was always out of reach. Why do you think he wanted to retire so desperately?
No, I think, and I've seen he was 70, he had 78 years, 78.
Yeah.
So 77, and his birthday is April 16.
Yeah.
And April 19, he was elected Pope, 3 days after his birthday.
Yeah.
Now, one thing for him was very, very important, to write or to finish a book about Jesus Christ. Like a witness about his personal, scientific life, about a priest, about a bishop, and also cardinal, with all the experiences, the personal experiences. And therefore he had, okay, that's my future, and I have time, and I will finish that book. And I remember very well then, in April he was elected. And then about 2 or 3 months later, because in that time, that 3 months, he didn't speak about the book. No word. Because he was convinced it's over.
He won't be able to do it.
It's not more possible. Being a pope, I have to do others. And in June, I asked me, can you make a copy of this article? Of course, why not? And then, well, for me, was the first time that desire to continue was reborn.
And that became the Jesus of Nazareth. Tell me about the historic resignation. Okay, here we are, February 2013. It shocked the world, but you knew about this, Archbishop. You had indications of this much earlier. How did you come to know that Pope Benedict intended to resign? And in the book you indicate that you tried to talk him out of it.
Yes,
How?
that's right. We have been, it was September 2012. Normally the Pope or the Popes have been from the 1st of July, or after John Paul II, he liked to go first in the mountain and then till October, Castle and over. Normally August was a free month, only the general audiences and the Angelus Domini.
Right, on Sundays.
Okay, Sundays. I've seen, it was in March and April, he went to Mexico and to Cuba. He went back, was very tired, very, very, very tired. And then he slept step by step till July. And in these days, from July to August, he was like exhausted. Because in these days, he finished the small Jesus from Nazareth. And I thought he had all the strength, all what are in reserve, put down and put in.
He expended himself writing that book.
And then in September, he said to me, normally I was by him well, 11 o'clock with the correspondence, and then in the afternoon another time, 2 times a day. And he said to me, this evening came earlier. Please come earlier. Okay. He came. And normally he sit down. He was sitting on the chair, on the table, and I was up and they said, no, take also you a chair. The first time in 8 years. I wonder. Okay, and then I have to say you something. I'm old. I have no more strength. I have reflected, I have prayed, I have struggled with myself. And I have come to the conviction, not only that I have to resign from papacy. By love of Jesus and the Church. And I said, Holy Father, it's impossible. No, that's impossible. Far away. You can delegate this. Oh, I've spoken like a fighter about 5 minutes. He was still silent. And then he said to me, excuse me, I have not said something to discuss. It's not more necessary. I have told you my decision. Oh, it was that, in that moment I do not know, but it was heavy.
Yeah.
And that was the first, and then you will be one of the 3 persons who knows that. And please, you have now be under the pontifical secret.
Wow.
That was the first time a month ago.
But did he consider the consequences of that? Or I've read some reports where he assumed his protege, Angelo Scola, was going to succeed him, or someone like him. Was that the thinking?
I fear that was the thinking. Someone will come and to convince it's not possible, like me.
He wouldn't hear it.
No. I cannot say why, but he said, no, I cannot more. And I think, and that all the years after, when he was a resigned Pope or Pope Emeritus, he never had a doubt that was the right decision.
Was it? You've seen all the reportage. It was Vatican leaks. It was
No. Yes. Yeah.
You don't. That has
No.
nothing.
That is, he said sometimes to me, there is no reason in all the things that went wrong, Vatican leaks or homosexual groups, or that. Sometimes there was it was not real, and in another way, he said, I can go now because there is no danger of the church. If there is a wolf coming and the shepherd cannot go, but if there is no wolf, there is no danger, I can. And the Lord will preserve, and the Lord will guide his church with another successor of Peter.
Did he regret it?
Never.
How do you see those 10 years? Right. And how, I mean, I know he was praying. I know he was writing. I know he was suffering. Tell me about that time.
The first 2 months, he was exhausted. He was very tired. He has spoken very, very little. And then, after they come back to Rome, after May, 2nd May, I remember very well, more and more the strength came back. Wow. And there was, he is a very systematic man. No?
Yes.
Holy Mass, bravery, then the breakfast, rest, then bravery, then correspondence, lecture, music, bravery, and then lunch. After lunch, a small walk. They had a very
The gardens.
No, after lunch, we have been on our terrace in the monastery, and rest, and then in the afternoon, the first was the bravery, and then we went out to pray the rosary. Back correspondence, and there are, in the first years, at the end of the morning and in the late afternoon, there have been guests. Many asked, and then dinner, small dinner, and then he retired. And that's many years. Of course, he did not write. He answered the correspondence. But there were a few occasions where he was asked to say something,
Right.
to write something, and also to help something. And normally he could not say no. And he would not say no.
I want to talk about Summorum Pontificum, which is one of the hallmarks of Benedict's legacy. Of course, his focus was always on the reform of the liturgy. That was always his life's work. And whether it was the translations in the Novus Ordo around the world, or permitting greater freedom for the old Latin rite. And I'll read from Summorum Pontificum. He said it was always clear, or you write this, it was always clear in Ratzinger's mind that there was only one rite, subsisting in the coexistence of an ordinary and extraordinary form. The one intention of his motu proprio was to repair the gaping wound that had formed over time, be it voluntary or involuntary. Now, what were the Pope's thoughts after he saw that motu proprio play out? Was he pleased with the way it was received at the time?
In that time, Pope Benedict has been very weak, physically. And normally, he asked me to read something he would read, And he was there on the paper, on the table, and I'm here, and I have read from the Osservatore Romano the text, because the only text was published in that time in the Osservatore Romano. I read and read. There was the motu proprio and also the letter of Pope Francis.
You're talking about Custodes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
So so I was talking about his motu proprio and how it was received, how Benedict was received.
Oh, no.
But now you're talking about when Pope Francis
Yes.
basically clamped down on the Latin Rite and demolished that motu proprio.
About his motu proprio for Benedict, was allowed to have a
You're right. It was a liberalization of the old rite.
Because there are two intentions. The first, that the liturgy is the way to connect with God. And it's impossible that the liturgy, that was the liturgy for 500 years, many saints, and will be forbidden, or is not more allowed. And the first step in that direction has made John Paul II.
Yes.
That's the first.
With Ecclesia Dei,
With
where
Ecclesia Dei.
they allowed it in certain instances with the permission of the bishop.
And in the year after, Cardinal Ratzinger and also Pope Benedict have seen that's good, but it's too. There are many, I do not know of many, but there are bishops that did not agree, and that's not good. And therefore he gave more liberty.
Mm-hmm. And let the priests decide whether they wanted to celebrate the old rite or not.
And the second was, liturgy is so important that it cannot be forbidden by means or by motives or by reasons that are not clear. And therefore he said, I will open, and that must lead to the peace in the church regarding liturgy, and also including then Pius XII.
Right. Yeah. And it worked.
It worked.
It brought peace. Yes. What did you learn from him in those last days, in that last period? I mean, when you're with someone, particularly someone with a deep faith life, when you see them at the end of their life, going through the struggles that we all will go through, what did you learn from him? What did you take from that?
Two things. The first thing, he was, what he taught, he lived. And he lived that also in the last month and weeks and days, getting more and more down, weak. The second, there is no reason to not remain a faithful Catholic, because it's the direct way to the heaven.
Who Believes is Not Alone, My Life Beside Benedict XVI by Archbishop Georg Ganswein is available now at bookstores everywhere and online, including the EWTN catalog at EWTNRC.com. Before we go, some sad news to report. A longtime and very dear member of the EWTN family, Lee South, passed away suddenly this week after a short illness at the age of 77. She was the mother of 3, grandmother of 4, and beloved by so many of us. Lee was a close friend to our family, godmother to my daughter. She was like a mother to many of us at EWTN. And Lee worked closely with Doug Keck as producer of his Bookmark show. She was also part of the EWTN family for nearly 30 years. The loss of Lee is devastating to all of us, and we ask you to keep the South family in your prayers. We'll miss you terribly, Lee. The consolation is she's finally reunited with her beloved husband, Ned South, who passed away in 2006. Rest in peace, dear Lee. I'll miss your reviews and your notes after the show. That's all the time we have for now. Be sure to catch us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I thank you for watching. Happy New Year. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.